The barking started before sunrise. By 8:30, the parking lot was full cars wedged in crooked lines, dogs pulling their leashes, people clutching carriers to their chests. Through the glass of my brand-new clinic, Bluegrass Animal Haven, I watched them gather in the drizzle like a small parade of hope and confusion. Valerie rushed to my side, cheeks flushed. "Lila, they're circling the block. We're out of forms again." I didn't move. My hands gripped the counter until my knuckles turned white. 17 days ago, this place had been an abandoned pediatric office with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. Today, the air smelled of antiseptic and fresh paint and the impossible. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of a black sedan parked across the street. Even through the rain, I recognized him. Brian Hayes, the new boss who'd once looked at me over a tablet and declared, 40% pay cut. Dr. Merren. Nothing personal, just business. He hadn't expected me to smile that day, or to slide a sealed envelope across his desk. "Then here's my business decision," I'd said quietly, before walking out of Oakwood Animal Clinic for the last time. Now, 3 weeks later, he stood under his umbrella, watching the line stretch around the corner, watching my patients and their families crowd toward the doors of my clinic. Even from here, I could see the flicker of disbelief breaking across his carefully trained corporate smile. Valerie whispered, "He's really here." I turned from the window, heart hammering with something between anger and exhilaration. Then let him see what a 40% pay cut buys. When I unlocked the doors, the sound hit me, bells chiming, paws skittering on tile. A dozen voices greeting me at once. The noise filled every inch of the space that used to echo with doubt. I took a breath, forced my voice steady. "Welcome to Bluegrass Animal Haven." Behind me, the rain kept falling, washing the last trace of his world off the glass. I pulled on my white coat and stepped forward. It was time to show them what business really looked like. When Dr. Harrington sold Oakwood Animal Clinic, I told myself it wouldn't change much. A new name on the letterhead, maybe a few new forms to fill out. Nothing that could touch what really mattered: the work, the patients, the people. Then Brian Hayes walked in. He arrived on a Tuesday morning wearing a navy suit that looked too expensive for Lexington. His smile was thin, his handshake colder than the rain outside. By lunchtime, he'd already installed a wall-mounted digital clock in the break room to improve time awareness. By Wednesday, we were in the conference room staring at charts and metrics none of us had ever seen. "Bright Paw Partners is committed to efficiency," he began, pacing slowly. The tablet in his hand glowed as he swiped through slides of color-coded graphs. "Oakwood's profit margins are 15% below the regional average. We'll fix that." I felt Valerie shift beside me, across the table. Maggie, our lead tech, scribbled something in her notepad but didn't look up. Then he turned to me. "Dr. Merren, you've been here the longest. 14 years, 15 next month." He nodded, smiling like a man about to deliver good news. "Then you'll understand the need to align compensation with industry standards. Effective next pay cycle. Your base salary will adjust accordingly, 40% reduction." For a moment, the hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. 40, I repeated softly. He tapped the tablet again. "It's still generous by regional metrics. Nothing personal. Just business." I studied him, the perfect posture, the ring of confidence polished by repetition. Behind him hung a framed photo of Dr. Harrington with a golden retriever, a snapshot of what we used to be. "When do these changes begin?" I asked. "Next pay cycle." I nodded once, careful not to let the tremor in my hands show. "Later." As the meeting dispersed, I caught snippets of whispers: reduced hours, new quotas, efficiency audits. Valerie avoided my eyes. Thomas, our newest vet, looked pale. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and sat in the quiet until the clock ticked past 6. The charts might have measured our time, but they knew nothing about what we'd already given. That night, I stayed long after the others had gone home. The clinic was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator that held vaccines and the soft ticking of the clock above the front desk. I switched off the lobby lights but left the hallway lamps glowing, just enough to cast long shadows over the walls lined with photos, faces of people and animals I'd cared for through nearly half my life. There was Baxter, the beagle who once needed weekly hydrotherapy after a car accident. Mittens, the one-eyed cat who used to sit on my shoulder like a pirate's companion. Scout, the golden retriever who brought Dr. Harrington coffee every morning until his last day of work. The cards were still pinned along the bulletin board, corners curling with age, handwritten notes in different inks. Thank you for saving Daisy. We'll never forget what you did for Luna. Some had tiny paw prints stamped beside the signatures. Others were drawn by children who'd lost their first pets and needed someone to tell them it was okay to cry. I ran my fingers across the edges of those cards, remembering the faces that came with them. Each one carried a story, an emergency in the middle of the night, a reunion after surgery, a goodbye whispered through tears. On the far wall hung a framed photo of Dr. Harrington and me during my first year here. He was already gray-haired then, his stethoscope tangled with mine as we leaned over a litter of newborn kittens. I could still hear his voice. Keep it human, Lila. That's what matters when everything else starts to look like business. He'd trusted me to carry that promise forward. And for 15 years, I had... Now, staring at the empty waiting room, I wondered what it would mean to leave this place behind. The scent of disinfectant, the worn tiles, the echoes of laughter in exam rooms, all of it felt woven into who I was. If I walked away, it wouldn't just be a job I lost. It would be the life I'd built, quietly, one heartbeat at a time. By the end of the week, the air in the clinic felt different, thinner somehow, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Conversations stopped when footsteps approached. The break room, once filled with laughter and the sound of kettle whistles, now smelled of burnt coffee and tension. I found Thomas Reed, our newest veterinarian, standing by the supply shelves, checking inventory. He'd joined only 6 months earlier, fresh from a corporate practice in Nashville. At 33, he still carried that mix of ambition and exhaustion common to young doctors. "How are you holding up?" I asked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Depends which spreadsheet you ask." When I didn't answer, he lowered his voice. "I've worked under Brightpaw before. It always starts like this cost-cutting, new policies, tracking efficiency per hour. Then come the upsell targets, flea treatments, supplements, wellness plans. Everything becomes a number." I studied his face, the faint bitterness there, and the patience. He looked away. They become a means to an end. That's why I left. Before I could reply, Valerie appeared at the doorway, holding a clipboard close to her chest. Her eyes darted toward the hallway to make sure we were alone. "They cut my hours," she whispered. 30%. Said it's temporary, but... She trailed off, her voice breaking. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. She shook her head. "Everyone's scared, Lila. We don't even know who'll be next." That night, after the clinic emptied, I sat alone at my desk staring at the photo of Dr. Harrington. I finally dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but tired. "I'm sorry, Lila," he said after hearing everything. "They promised they'd protect what we built. I should have known better. It's not your fault," I said softly. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "You could start your own practice. You know, Lexington needs people like you, real veterinarians." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, the phone still warm in my hand. For the first time, the idea didn't sound impossible. It sounded like survival. Sleep never came that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting the faint pulses of the clock on my nightstand until dawn blurred the edges of everything. By the time the sun rose, the decision had already taken shape, quiet, solid, and final. At 8 sharp, I printed my resignation letter, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a plain envelope. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked coats when I walked in. Valerie caught my eye at the reception desk, her expression full of questions I couldn't answer yet. Brian's office door was half open. He looked up from his tablet when I knocked. "Dr. Merren," he said with that same manufactured warmth. "Good morning. How's our transition coming along?" I set the envelope on his desk. "It's finished." He blinked, as if I'd interrupted a script. "Excuse me. My resignation. Effective 2 weeks from today." For the first time since he arrived, the mask slipped. His eyebrows rose, the corners of his mouth tightening into something between disbelief and amusement. "You're quitting over a standard market adjustment." I met his gaze. "Over a standard betrayal." He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "You'll find it's not easy to start over, doctor, especially in this town." "I'm not afraid of work," I said simply. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. He finally reached for the envelope, set it aside without opening it, and returned to his screen. "Human Resources will process it," he said. "Good luck. By afternoon." The whispers had started. Valerie found me by the supply shelves. "Is it true?" she asked. I nodded. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Wherever you go, Lila will follow." I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me all evening. Something had shifted in the air. Not rebellion, not yet, but the fragile beginning of it. When I locked the clinic door that night, the hallway behind me felt smaller, the sky outside impossibly wide. The new directive arrived on a Monday morning, an email marked urgent from Bright Paws headquarters, announcing the launch of premium care packages. Each bundle listed add-on services, from vitamin injections to advanced screenings, all marketed as comprehensive wellness upgrades. By noon, laminated posters were hanging in every exam room, showing cheerful pets beside inflated price lists. The memo below read, "All veterinarians are expected to recommend premium packages to 80% of clients." I stared at the numbers until the words blurred. That afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker came in with Chairman Meow, her frail orange tabby. She was in her 70s, living alone on a fixed income. "He's been limping again," she said, lowering her voice. "Same leg as before. The new protocol required me to recommend the full senior panel blood work. Imaging, supplements nearly $500 worth, but I'd just run the same tests 2 months ago." I examined the cat gently, tracing the tender joint. "We can adjust his dosage and recheck in a few weeks." I said, "No need to repeat the tests yet." Mrs. Whitaker's shoulders relaxed with relief. Then the door opened. Brian stepped inside without knocking, clipboard in hand. "Everything all right here?" he asked smoothly. "Just finishing up," I replied. He glanced at the chart. "Dr. Merren, this visit qualifies for the premium senior package. You didn't mention it. I considered it," I said evenly, and decided it wasn't medically necessary. Mrs. Whitaker looked between us, uneasy. Brian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Our goal is prevention, not reaction. Clients deserve to know every option." "They do," I said, "including the option not to pay for what they don't need." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the hum of the monitor. Mrs. Whitaker gathered her carrier and whispered a thank you before leaving. By evening, I found 3 of my long-term patients reassigned to other doctors effective immediately. I sat at my desk, anger burning cold and steady, opened my laptop and began typing. Subject, accelerate timeline. How fast can we open? 2 days after sending the email, I was standing in front of a faded brick building on Maple Avenue, keys cold in my hand. The place smelled of dust and old plaster, the floors scuffed from years of tiny sneakers and strollers. It had once been a pediatric clinic. The exam rooms were small, but the plumbing was sound, and the sunlight from the tall windows felt like a promise. I signed the lease before I could talk myself out of it. That afternoon, I sat across from Harriet Wells, the branch manager at Bluegrass Community Bank. She'd been a client years ago, her collie, Max, had survived a brutal case of pneumonia under my care. When I told her my plan, she smiled. "You saved my dog, Dr. Merren. Let's see what I can do to save your dream." By the end of the week, the loan was approved. I called the equipment suppliers I'd known for years, explaining my situation in careful, coded language. Most didn't need much convincing. "We've seen what happens when Brightpaw takes over," one rep said quietly. "Tell us what you need, and we'll make it work." Nights blurred together sketching floor plans on scraps of paper, comparing quotes, hunting for used exam tables online. The walls slowly transformed from sterile white to soft blue. I painted one room myself, leaving faint fingerprints on the edges of the door frame. Valerie came by one evening with takeout and a stack of files. "Just in case," she said. "Patient records Brightpaw never digitized." She hesitated, then added, "When you open, I want in." Thomas followed a few days later, helping install cabinets after hours. "I miss practicing medicine, not marketing," he said simply. And Maggie, our lead technician, texted me late one night, "Whatever you're building, count me in." The exhaustion didn't matter, for the first time in months. I woke before my alarm, eager to begin. Bluegrass Animal Haven wasn't just a plan anymore. It was taking shape, one breath, one heartbeat, one brushstroke at a time. My final Friday at Oakwood arrived gray and windless. The halls were too quiet, the scent of antiseptic sharper than usual. Valerie met my eyes as I walked past the reception desk, her expression a silent warning. "Conference room," she whispered. Inside. Brian sat at the head of the table, his suit immaculate, a glass of water placed perfectly in front of him. Beside him were two strangers, a woman in a navy skirt suit and a man in a muted gray one. "Corporate counsel," he said briskly, gesturing to them. "And HR. Before we finalize your departure, we need to discuss a few matters." The woman slid a document across the table. "This is a cease and desist order regarding any future veterinary practice within 20 miles of this facility for a period of 1 year. I didn't touch it. That's a non-compete," I said. She nodded. "It's standard for all employees under Brightpaw transition contracts. I never signed a non-compete." I replied. Brian's mouth curved. "It's included in the updated employee agreement. Check your file." I reached into my bag and placed a neat folder on the table. I already did. The pages inside were marked, highlighted, dated. Here's every document I signed. Not a single clause restricts practice. And, for the record, Kentucky law limits non-competes for medical professionals, veterinarians included, when patient welfare is at stake. The attorney's confidence faltered. She glanced at Brian, who suddenly found great interest in his glass of water. I continued calmly, "But I'm not here to argue. I'm willing to sign a 30-day non-solicitation clause. After that, we're done." The HR representative shifted uncomfortably. "That seems fair," she said. Brian's jaw tightened. "You won't last a month out there," he muttered. I gathered my folder, sliding it back into my bag. Then I suppose we'll both find out. When I left the room, the door's soft click sounded louder than any applause. It wasn't victory that filled me, it was freedom. 17 days after leaving Oakwood, I unlocked the glass doors of Bluegrass Animal Haven for the first time. The morning light spilled across the new tile floors, catching the faint sheen of fresh paint and steel. Valerie was already behind the front desk, arranging clipboards in neat stacks, her hands shaking just slightly. Outside, I could hear the low murmur of voices and barking. When I stepped out to look, my throat closed. The line stretched down the block. Families with carriers, children clutching leashes, elderly owners balancing canes and cat crates. Some waved when they saw me. Others just smiled through the drizzle. Thomas appeared beside me, still buttoning his coat. "Did you call all these people?" I shook my head. "Only a few." By 8:30, the waiting room was full. Valerie's voice carried over the noise. "Please fill out one form per pet. Yes, even turtles count." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Maggie darted between rooms, helping with check-ins and translating the chaos into rhythm. The first appointment of the day was Mrs. Whitaker with Chairman Meow. She set the carrier gently on the counter and looked up at me with misty eyes. "We followed you, Doctor," she said. "Didn't want anyone else." I knelt to stroke the cat through the bars. "Then you're both exactly where you belong." By noon, 70 animals had been registered. By closing, that number had doubled. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and wet fur and something I hadn't felt in months: hope. That evening, as we cleaned up, Valerie handed me her phone. A message from one of our old colleagues at Oakwood blinked across the screen. Emergency meeting called for tomorrow. Half the day's schedule empty. Thomas chuckled under his breath. Guess they didn't see this coming. I looked around at the crowded bulletin board already filling with thank you notes and photos. The sound of a puppy whining softly in the next room. We hadn't just opened a clinic. We'd rebuilt a promise. 3 months later, the rhythm of the new clinic had become second nature. Mornings began with the hum of machines warming up and the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the hallways. Valerie handled the phones with calm precision. Maggie ran inventory like clockwork, and Thomas had grown into the steady, confident vet I always knew he could be. The bulletin board in the lobby was already crowded with thank you cards and snapshots, dogs wrapped in post-surgery blankets, kittens adopted from rescues, children holding their pets like trophies of love. Sometimes I'd stop mid-routine and just listen. The low murmur of voices, the click of keyboards, the soft clatter of tools in the sterilizer. It wasn't noise anymore. It was proof. That morning, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Dr. Harrington stepped out slowly, leaning on his cane, his gray hair a little thinner than I remembered. When he walked through the doors, every staff member paused. "Well," he said, looking around with that warm, half-amused smile. "You've managed to restore what I lost." I led him on a quiet tour, the smell of disinfectant mixed with lavender cleaner, the exam rooms bright and calm. He ran his hand along the counter as though feeling the heartbeat of the place. "You did it right, Lila," he murmured. "You kept it human." After he left, I sat at my desk, surrounded by files and soft afternoon light. The inbox pinged with a new message. From Brian Hayes, subject potential collaboration opportunity. I read it twice before a laugh escaped me quiet, almost disbelieving. He wanted to discuss possible partnerships within the Lexington market. I typed my reply without hesitation. Next Tuesday, 2 p.m. Nothing personal, just business. Outside my office, I heard Maggie call for Thomas, Valerie laughing as a puppy wriggled free from its leash. The sound was alive, imperfect, real. I leaned back in my chair, letting the noise wash over me. I hadn't just survived. I'd built something that couldn't be bought, downsized, or erased, and that was enough.